And here's what I think will be the last and the third part of this installment. We'll see how it goes. So what influences how children learn gender roles? Parents. From birth, our dads tend to interact more with sons than daughters, while mothers tend to interact more with daughters than sons. So, okay. So we understand that to kind of be true. So I'm going to adjust my camera again one more time. Mothers play traditional games like peekaboo, whereas dads play more physical, rough games. Peers also. By the age of 3, most children's play shows the impact of gender stereotypes. Boys prefer to play with blocks and trucks, and girls prefer to play with tea sets and dolls. Young children are critical of peers who engage in cross-gender play. Once children learn rules about gender play, they often harshly punish others who violate these rules. I'm going to kind of pick and choose through here. You can kind of pause these and jot these down as you need to. I'll kind of pick and choose here. Children spontaneously select same-sex playmates. Adult pressure isn't necessary here, and children often resist their parents' efforts to get them to play with members of the opposite sex. Television also has a profound influence. Women on television still tend to be cast in romantic, marital, or family roles. Men on television tend to be cast in leadership or professional roles. Children who watch a lot of television end up with more stereotypical views of males and females. So, the notion of what is gender appropriate will change or vary over time in one place. That's another point I want to make. An example, in the U.S. in the 1700s, male politicians were essentially drag queens. I mean, look at pictures of them. Google it if you want. They were essentially wearing stockings and high heels and makeup. By today's standards, if we saw our male politicians dressed like this, we would think something was very wrong. In the early 1900s, young boys were typically photographed in dresses. Again, a lot of you, if you aspire to have young children one day, probably would not take your young son to have him photographed in a dress. Female athletes, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was seen as being very strange or stigmatic for girls to want to play sports. And now female sports are very prevalent and even more popular than boy sports in some high schools. Colonial men's clothing. If you want an idea of how the idea of what's gender appropriate will change and evolve over time, I would ask the guys, and some of you girls too, how many of you would wear this, men? Ladies, if you have boyfriends, how many of you would allow your boyfriend to come to school dressed like that? I'm guessing probably you would not. You don't have to know these. These are just kind of some explanations of the clothing that men in upper classes, in the upper class, aspired to wear. This was like the Abercrombie & Fitch, the Hollister stuff that the kids and adolescents tend to covet today. This is what you would want. And some of the wording in this just makes me laugh. Body garments and breeches. It's just kind of, makes me laugh. Waistcoat, short skirt, silk stocking. If you say those words to me, I'm probably not going to buy the clothes, being a guy. So again, terms like, I'll try to find them here. Where did it go? You're saying things like double-breasted, large lapels, probably long-tailed skirt. Probably you're not going to get me to buy. Colonial men's hairstyles. Guys, how many of you would come to school sporting this hairstyle? Girls, how many of you would let your boyfriends come to school wearing something described as a disheveled crop in the negligee style? Again, I don't know if you can make these words out, but again, it gives you an idea of how the idea of what is gender will change over time in one place. What is appropriate behavior or conduct for one gender may or may not be appropriate for the other. Example, girls have a tendency to communicate with each other. If they see each other, they're friendly, they may hug, they may kiss, they go to the bathroom in pairs. I don't get that. But I remember one time stopping at a rest area out of state, and it was like a party in the girls' bathroom. I mean, everybody was yelling and screaming and laughing and having a good time. I'm like, who do you know in there? I'm asking, and it's like, well, I don't know. We're just kind of talking. She just, it's just what we do. We just kind of talk, and I'm like, I'm thinking when I go into the men's room at a rest stop, there's like 10 guys in there. Nobody talks. You don't do that. It's understood that you don't make eye contact and you just get in and out. So very different. I couldn't greet my best friend at the mall with a hug and a kiss like maybe my wife could greet one of her female friends. It would be seen as being inappropriate. So it's okay for girls to do that, but it's not really so much for us. Sexism. This is another term you'll want to have. This is stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination based upon gender. The example, or the idea rather, that women can't be police officers or firefighters, or that men can't be nurses, or that men shouldn't be secretaries. We have these ideas of what men and women should do. So you see the male hairdresser here. We automatically make assumptions about what people are like, their sexual orientation, etc., when we see them especially in gender inappropriate roles in terms of occupation. The female construction worker, Danica Patrick, you may have heard of her, NASCAR driver, male nurses. So these represent images of people who kind of buck that or go against those gender stereotypes in terms of occupation. But it's still very much alive. Gender stereotyping is still very much alive in terms of occupation. Men still dominate the building trades. 99% of brick masons, stone masons, heavy equipment operators are men. 87% of architects and engineers are men. 85% of police officers, 70% of physicians and surgeons are men. Speech pathologists, dental hygienists, preschool, kindergarten teachers, receptionists, LPNs, still largely women. So we still have these ideas of what is gender appropriate, very much alive and well for men and women in this country. Adherence of men to that masculine gender role can result in a lot of problems for us men. When we feel like we have to stick to that stereotypical box and be strong and be macho and be unemotional, it creates problems for us. It creates higher rates of depression, higher suicide rates, desperation, substance abuse problems, as well as physical health problems. And for women, I don't have the slide up here, but for women, women who feel like they have to adhere to that feminine gender role, when they want to maybe bust out of that a little bit, can also create higher rates of anxiety and depression for them. It can create substance abuse problems and physical health problems for women as well. So, and that's very much documented. So we can start linking this stuff to specific mental health problems, if you will. And I'm going to try something here. I'm going to see if it works. And that's okay, it does not work. So we're going to go ahead and call that the end of that part. Part 3, the end of the lecture on gender for Sissonville High School. Thank you.